before I went to med school and residency, I spent about 7 years studying to become a monk. And that was like transformative for me. And what I really loved about it is like I was struggling in school. So I basically I was a smart kid. I was, I jumped a grade and then like was doing fine in school until I kind of hit high school and college. And then I started like failing out of college because like I was just getting straight Fs. I was one of these gifted kids who didn't learn how to study. And so one of the things that really frustrated me is like I knew what I needed to do, right? So like I just need to wake up every day. And like I need to go to Spanish class at 8 a.m. And I have trouble waking up. So then the next semester I was like, okay, like let me get us 8 a.m. Spanish class. That way it'll force me to wake myself up. And if I force myself to wake myself up at 8 a.m., then like my day will be productive. So I tried all of these intellectual techniques to analyze my life and try to figure out like how I should optimize things. But the basic problem is that like this thing did not listen to this, right? So I knew what I needed to do. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And what I really found when I went to India and I was like failing out of college and my dad was like, we've tried everything. Like, Alok, you need to go to India. Right. So he's like, and I was like, all right, fine, whatever.
Well, what does that mean? He says, Alok, you just need to go to India. You're like, Dad, I've tried everything. I'm getting Fs. You got to go to India, son.
How is India going to like straighten you out?
It's a great question. So I'm Indian.
Yeah.
So, my family is lucky enough. It's my karma to have this kind of background. And my parents are wonderful people. And they tried everything. So like, as I started failing, they tried tough love. They tried, they sent me to see a psychologist. Like they kind of tried everything under the sun and nothing was working. And so like, I think they understood that there is a knowledge about the self in the East that is very powerful compared to the West. And if y'all want to understand that, the simple thing to understand is that all of our scientific understanding about you, neuroscience, psychology, whatever, none of it actually applies to you. It's all population-based. So when we say, like, do y'all get that?
Yes.
Right? So this is the problem.
For the average viewer, I think probably explain
yeah,
that
so this is the thing that's kind of confusing for people. So if I say that, like, let's say SSRIs or antidepressant medications are 30% effective for depression. Does that mean that if I give you an antidepressant medication and you are depressed, you will get 30% better? Absolutely not. So what we do in Western science is we take 10,000 people and we give them something. Like we'll give them, let's say, antidepressant medication. And then we'll see on average, what's the improvement. So what you really need to understand is amongst those 10,000 people, there are actually 10,000 individual responses to these medications. And then what we do is we average all these together and then we kind of say, this is what's right. So the best example of this is like, do y'all know where we got 2,000 calorie diet? Any idea?
Probably just the average person, right?
Absolutely. So it has nothing to do with science, nothing to do with metabolism, nothing to do with physiology, nothing to do with carbs or keto or any of that stuff. It's not scientific at all. Literally what we did, there's this thing called the NHANES study. And what we did is we asked Americans, do you have any health problems? And they said no. And then we said, okay, for all the people who have no health problems, how many calories a day do you eat? And then we literally averaged that number. And this became a recommendation. So if we use this system for fashion, right, what would be our recommendation? We're going to take what you're wearing. We're going to take what you're wearing. We're going to take what I'm wearing. We're going to find 3 random women on the street. We're going to take all those pieces of clothing. We're going to average them together. And everyone's going to wear like a gray smock, right? That's our recommendation. So a big thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Western medicine is not individualized. And this is precisely why you can read a paper on neuroscience. Let's say you read a paper on neuroscience that says willpower correlates with success. And then what do you do with that? Like I read that paper and then do I get better at willpower? Like there's no subjectivity to it. So in the East, the way that they learned about their mind was very different. They started with me and only me. I don't care about anybody else. How does this instrument work from a subjective standpoint? And this is why the East developed meditation, because someone sat down and was like, how do I control my mind? How do I calm myself down? What is the technique that works? So what we see in Western science is that we're very deficient in techniques. We know everything about the science of charisma and the science of willpower and the science of memory. But have we figured out what's the best way to learn? Have we figured out what's the best way to boost willpower? You know what the answer is? What's the one practice that we have that boosts willpower and memory?
Boosts willpower and
Could be meditation.
Absolutely, right? And they figured that crap out 6,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago by some estimates, without a single scientific study. because they looked at what actually works for an individual, not what works for a population. And that's where we are in the West. And it's great. I mean, the Western medicine isn't bad, right? I'm a medical doctor, and it's good in a lot of ways. Because if we look at something like cholesterol medication, if I'm seeing 100 patients and I want like this population to die less of heart attacks, I can give them cholesterol medication. It'll improve the health of the population as a whole. But there's no individuality to it. And so this is where I think that like what my dad, kind of circling back to the point at hand, is he sort of recognized that like what I needed was like something that can be taught in India. Like I don't know exactly what he understood, but he kind of said like, hey, this is what you need. Because they tried everything else. So you just need to go. And for once in my life, I just like listened to him. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know what I was going to do there. I didn't know, but I know that I had tried everything that I needed to try and like nothing was working. So I needed something drastic. And that it certainly was.
Okay. So you go to India, you arrive. What happens? Do they just send you to like a camp or something?
You have family in there that you stay with, or how does this work?
Great questions. Okay. So the first thing to understand is I've been to India a ton of times, but I went to a part of India that I've never been before, don't know anyone, don't speak the language.
How much did you know going into this?
Nothing.
You just showed up in India.
I just showed up. He said, you need to go. We booked a plane ticket for 10 days, and then I hopped on the plane.
What is like, okay, I'm wondering, as a kid, my dad says, Jack, you have to go to the homeland. You're going to Wales. And I'm like, okay, I know nothing about Wales. They send me off to Wales. I arrive. Then what?
You like meeting someone?
I'll tell you literally what happened. Okay. So so this conversation with my dad is at 2 a.m. It's in our living room. Okay. And the reason we're having this conversation is it's the end of my sophomore year. It's my second year on academic probation. I'm on the verge of failing out of college, or I've already sort of failed out. And it's like, if I continue failing, they're going to kick me out. Okay. And we've tried everything. He's tried yelling it for the last 3 years. We've been having like heart-to-heart talks and trying to problem solve and whatever. So we're just both resigned. We're like, this is screwed, right? This is just not working. So then he just says, you need to go to India. That's what it was. So then I get on a plane. I go to the airport. And I land in Bangalore, and then like, I don't have a phone number. I don't know what's going on. Like, this was like back before cell phones were a thing. This is 2003. Okay. So like, I'm sitting there and I was like, well, shit, like, I don't know what, can I?
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally sorry.
Okay. So I'm like sitting there, right? And then this, like, finally, like, you know, I don't know if you guys know, but you know, when you go out of the airport, you walk out of the baggage claim, there's a bunch of people waiting for you. Like your family's waiting for you, and they wave. They're like, oh my God. Right. So like everyone leaves. And then there's one guy waiting there. And I walk up to him and I'm like, are you here to pick someone up? And he's like, yes. Okay. And I'm like, are you here to pick up Alok? And he's like, okay. And I'm like, do you speak English? And he's like, okay. And so I was like, are you here to pick me up? And he's like, okay. And so I didn't know who this guy was. He was waiting for someone. And I'm the last person there, so I get in a car with him. And then we're in the car, you get in this van. And then we're in this van for like 2 hours. And we clearly, like, we leave the city and we're driving out of the hills. There's like no light, okay? And then like we like drive, there's a gate. There's a guy at a gate. The guy opens the gate. We drive through. This is like 2.5 hours in. It's like a bumpy road. I can't see anything. Because the power had gone out, okay? So then like they like walk me to a place, and then like this lady comes out and she's like, you know, oh, hi, Alok. You know, like, I know your father really well. I'm Dr. Nagaratna. And so I was like, cool. Okay, thank God I came to the right place. They show me to my room. It's about midnight, maybe 12:30. So I like brush my teeth, I change, I go to sleep. Super bare room. I don't know if you guys have even seen like, you know, like poor conditions in developing. It's not like poor, but you know, it's like super simple, kind of like old school, like clay floor, single window, you know, fan that doesn't work, like very simple bed. So I go to sleep. And then suddenly I'm awoken by the sound of a bell. And then I'm like, what the? And I hear this bell, like someone's ringing this bell. And I look outside and I see the moon. I'm like, what is going on here? So I'm kind of like, is something wrong? So I think like there's a fire or something, because it sounds like a fire alarm. And I step outside and I hear people moving in the rooms, but no one seems panicked. So I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I guess I'm going to get dressed, because I hear toilets flushing and whatnot. So I get dressed and then I kind of wander outside. It's like 4:30 in the morning, the moon's up. Next thing that I hear is, bleh. I'm like, what was that? And then I hear it again. Bleh. Bleh. And then I hear like literally 50 or 60 people like vomiting. And then I walk out and then I see like in the moonlight, there's a ditch and there's about 50 people lined up and there's a handful of people walking behind them. And all of these people are vomiting copious amounts of stuff into the ditch. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I walked into? Is this like the plague? Am I going to die? Turns out that there's this yogic practice called vamandhoti. And vamandhoti is a practice that you do where you drink like a gallon of isotonic water, so salt water, and then you vomit it up. And it turns out that this practice probably has a ton of health benefits, hasn't been studied very well, but is really good for like allergies and things like that. You know, I can't recommend that as a medical doctor because we don't have the data, but that's just one of, and I'm like, oh my God, what is this place? And so it turns out that nothing was wrong and that this is just a yogic cleansing practice, or shuddhi practice, which like helps you, you know, clean out your like lungs and your stomach and like all this other kind of stuff. I know it sounds shocking. And so what I discovered in India was, that was my experience of what I walked into, actually. So I think I was answering a question.
So a couple things. How were you not just horrified? Because
I was horrified.
I would not trust getting into a car with a guy that couldn't speak my language. I didn't even know if I was picked up by the right guy. He drives for 2 hours in a van.
In the middle of nowhere, I wouldn't.
I would call my dad and be like, Dad, is this the guy? Like, send him a photo of the guy. Like, are you sure?
2003, there's no cell phone.
A landline. There's got to be a payphone somewhere.
But you just, so even just getting in the car with this guy,
Jack,
maybe times were different back then.
So when you say, let's understand something, forget about times are different. It's not about times different. It's about me and you.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes, let's hear.
Okay, so when you say you're terrified.
Yes.
Terrified of what?
Losing my life, getting kidnapped.
Your life is worth something?
Yes.
Mine wasn't.
Well.
Right? Like, to be honest.
But
like,
okay, so were you like depressed and things, or was it? Like
I'm sure. Like, take your pick, bro, of whatever mental state that is negative you would, like, I was going nowhere. Dude, I was someone who was a smart kid, failing out of college. You know, the town that I grew up in, 5 out of 5 Indian kids that were in my grade, in the whole city, 3 of them became doctors. Right? So, like, super high expectations. Like, failing at life miserably, trying everything that I knew, because I'm a smart kid. I'm supposed to be, what did I have? What was worth losing? Nothing. I had nothing worth losing.
That makes sense.
So you're here at this place. How does this change your perspective? What do they do? How do they start?
So the first 2 weeks, I'm crying every day. Every day I get on the phone and I call from a payphone, right? So they have like a payphone, like one payphone in the ashram. And like, I'm on the verge of telling my dad, like, send me a ticket. I want to come home. I hate it here. Like, I can't eat anything. I've got like all kinds of GI problems from like stress related stuff and things like that. So I'm like on the verge of vomiting. It's boring there. We're doing a bunch of yoga and we're like learning some meditation techniques, but it doesn't really do anything for me. And then, so for the first 2 weeks, like, I hate it. And then what I remember, like, I even remember the daily phone calls and thinking to myself, like, I'm going to tell him like to send me a ticket and I want to come home. And then over the course of that phone call, I'm kind of like choking back tears. And I say like, not today. Like, I'm not going to like cave today. I can always get a ticket tomorrow. I can last like one more day. And it was also like a ton of shame. It's not like pride and like perseverance. It's like shame. It's like, I can't even do this. Like, I'm going to call my daddy and say like, send me a ticket. Like, I've washed out of this too. I couldn't handle the shame of it.